Hello, everyone. My name is Eddie Pierre, and I am very glad to be here today to share some good news with. Briefly, I wanted to share with you a little bit over a decade ago. I have embarked into a journey. I venture into a journey uh, to find out some things that was rather interested to me. And the journey was a journey of exploratory as well as discovery. And this journey came about after I published my first book, In Search of Meaning. And my intention was to go and literally see what is the book was telling the world. What is it I was telling the world in writing of this book? In addition to, I want to know what was the world was telling me in response to the book. And thus I began this journey. And also it was my intention to have a deeper understanding of the world that I was experiencing, a broader, a more expansion in my understanding of the world and how I was experiencing the world, as well as the things that I was learning in the world. To my surprise, and as well as unbeknown to me, have no idea what I was going to find out. I even entitled the journey Born Without a Trace, hoping whatever I find out. And again, a little bit over a decade ago, we did not have podcasts. The social media come to be known as podcasts. It's rather fairly new as the technological revolution continued to evolve itself. And so my intention was whatever I find out in this quest of journey, I was to write about it and entitle it Born Without a Trace. And behold, something came along called podcasts, way in which we can communicate to each other, and way in which we can share our thought and view with each other, which is what many, many people in the world is doing. And so as I embark into this journey, I have find and learned many things. One of the things that I have learned into this journey is that the world is very noisy and loud. Our world is noisy and loud. And now, for those of you who've been listening to some of the shorts that I've been shared on my tablets as well on the phone, I make reference to this concept, the world is noisy and loud, and I make sure that my view of this thing, world, is not the earth, and I'm sure we understand that. The earth is not a world, it's a planet shared by a world of humanity, which we currently have some 8 billion plus people sharing this planet Earth, which we call the world. And so the first thing I realized in my journey and quest to have a deeper understanding of the world and how I was experiencing the world is that the world is very noisy and loud. Our lives is very noisy and loud. Everything and everyone is noisy and loud. And so I focus as I was contemplating, thinking, and listening to what was that telling me that the world is noisy and loud and that our lives are noisy and loud. And so I make it a point to meditate and contemplate and think very deep about what this thought was telling me, what message, what lesson I was supposed to draw from that. And another thing that I learned through my journey, as I said, this journey quest, I ventured out for over a decade ago, talking about 2012. It also, I find out our lives is very broken. We are actually living in a broken world. We are broken. And let me preference that. By broken, I'm not talking into our essence of being. We are broken in our pursuit, in our needs, in our wants, in our desires, in our actions, in our reactions, in our intention, the things we do, both to pursue the things we want, the needs and desire, and the dreams and goal, as well as the response we express when things happen, cause us to be broken. And so I realize we live in a broken world. Our lives are shattered by the things we do, the things we say, the things we believe. And I have learned that also as I venture out in this journey. I also learned, which was very, very hard for me to process, although I know that concept, I know this issue exists, but to come face to face with it the way I did is that we're living in a very traumatic world. Our lives is filled with trauma. Millions, if not billions of people on a daily basis, every year, all through our lives, experience trauma. All around this thing we call world in our lives, we are experiencing trauma. And so my thoughts again was how I'm going to write those three things: that we're living in a broken world, and that our lives are broken, and that our lives are shattered, and we're also living in a world of trauma. Our world is very traumatized, and our world is very noisy and loud. Let me share with you briefly, and this can bring to mind some of the thought I shared in my shorts video. I had a grandfather. My grandfather was a wonderful, brilliant, which I consider very, very intelligent man. I love my grandfather. I believe he loved me. One of the things my grandfather used to do with me, where there was a place back home, a road or a street, what we call it the boulevard. It was a very big road and very long, miles and miles long. And my grandfather used to, he has a habit, he will go to the boulevard. There were trees on one side of this boulevard, and on the other side was the ocean, miles and miles of water. There were ships, there were boats, there were people swimming where they were allowed to swim, and you can look far and beyond into the horizon of this ocean and see boats who's far away and boats who were nearby. And my grandfather will sit there for hours, as often he can, almost like either every day, every week, but as often he can, he will go there and just sit down under one of those trees, enjoying the cool breeze and watching the oceans and pay attention to what was going on. At least that was my understanding as a kid. And then he began to take me along with him. Every time he would tell my grandmother, tell Eddie to get ready, he's coming with me. And so at first I enjoyed to spend time with my grandfather, but then as a kid, I want to go home and play with my friend. But that was not the case. My grandfather will take me along, and he will sit down, and he will tell me to sit down, son. We sit down, and we just sit down, and I'm enjoying the scenery, look at the boat and the ships, and sometimes an airplanes will go overhead, and I will enjoy people walking by, lovers going by. And then as a kid, I began to say, Pa, I used to call him, Papa. I said, Pa, what are we looking at? And he will look at me straight in the eyes. He will go like this, say, shh, listen. I'm like, oh no. And then we continue. He will take me along as often he goes over there. And I remember more than one, I will say, Pa, what is it we doing here? What are we looking at? And he will do the same thing. He will always say, shh, just listen, son. I said, okay. Well, my grandfather passed away many years ago, and now I'm grown up. I am an adult. And through my own journey, as my grandfather was before me, I venture to different areas of my life, one of which I explore the fields of meditation, contemplation, mindfulness, which, by the way, that is the name of our podcast, Mindful Conversation for Critical Time. I will share this with you again, but throughout my journey, I have ventured into the field of meditations, contemplation, yoga. I practice and teach meditation. I practice and teaches yoga. I find myself for many years, including today, including this week, go by the water and just sit down. Every place I go, the first thing I want to know, where are the lakes? Where are the waters? Where are the rivers? The ocean, when I go, my favorite things to do with the ocean is to get up as early before everybody goes down to the beach, is to sit by the ocean. As soon as people start coming, I leave. And what is it? It become dawn on me. That's what my grandfather was teaching me. To listen to the inner voice, to listen to the inner dialogue that was taking place inside of me. And also, I have become a counselor, a therapist, a mental health professional, a public speaker, a teacher. Learn to listen to the pain and the sorrow of those who suffer with trauma. Those our lives are so noisy with the pain and the suffering they have endured through different experiences in their lives. And then I realize we need to listen to the voices that's speaking to us inside of us. Then I realized that what my grandfather was teaching me, how to listen to the inner voice, what he was telling me. And I'm very grateful for that. And now I can see through my counseling and as a mental health professional over the years, I learned how to listen to the people I work with who's suffering with pain. One of the things I also learned is that we are wounded, what I call the wounds of time. There are wounds time doesn't heal. We carry those wounds with us. And so this podcast, it is a podcast that's designed to explore, as I share with you. It is a podcast that dedicated, it's a conversation, I must say, that dedicated to explore how rampant discontent, distrust, and contentious emotional, mental, emotional, and psychological is drowning the world of humanity into utter chaos. Our life is loud and noisy, our pain loud and noisy, our suffering loud and noisy. We wear them in our face, we carry them in our brows. And so there we are. The podcast is born. It is my intention to share those things with you. And I hope you're willing to indulge me, willing to engage me in this mindful conversation for the critical time. We are living in a very critical moment in the history of humanity. It is also my intention, which I will not do here. This is simply an introduction to share with the world of humanity, that is, to share with you that finally the podcast is born. Lots of people would say to you, I'm sure you probably hear those statements, oh, to have a podcast, all you need is your smartphone, your telephone, and all you need is a computer. And that's not what we learned through the months and weeks. We put lots of work the minute we decided we want to have a podcast. There's lots of planning, lots of strategic move to do. There's lots of equipment actually you need. If you take your phone, you record something on it. I don't know. I'm sure those high-tech people can define this for us. whether or not you want to call this a podcast. But to have a formal podcast, there's some work to do. There's some equipment you need, and you have to make some investment. That's what we learned, and there's a lot of planning to do. In addition to have the podcast, you need the software, and the software is out there somewhere. There are many of them to which you have to purchase, and they're different, that offer different things, and you have to learn the mechanic of these software. And again, I'm fully aware there are people out there who just pick it up just like this, but that's not what we encounter. Of course, there was a lot of laughter as we trying to learn through trial and error, and we had to purchase equipment, whether it was lightning and pieces of equipment, and so podcasts require some planning, some strategy. Of course, you have to have a message that you want to share with the world. And so throughout this journey, I realized that I should say, that our lives is very noisy and loud. Our world is noisy and loud. Our lives is noisy and loud. Our pain and suffering are noisy and loud. That we are living in a broken world. Anyone who tell you otherwise, I call them noisemakers. And there we have it. These are noisemakers. Anyone who tell us we are not living in a traumatized world, he or she is a noisemaker. Anyone who's talking about how there's a bright future waiting for us is a noisemakers. The majority of people on the social platform are all noisemakers. And I call them noisemakers on the basis that if you are not addressing the fundamental issues of our lives, and what are they? That we are broken. We are carry the pains of time and the wounds of time. Our heart are broken. We often self-abandonment. We abandon ourselves in our pursuit of dreams and goals and aspiration, things that will never happen. Oh, please don't get me wrong. I believe in dreams and goal and aspiration. I am a public speaker. I encourage and motivate people. I will always do so. I do believe that there are others that have encouraged me and inspired me. So how I'm sitting there. Nevertheless, we need to educate people. We need to educate each other to deal with the pain and the wounds in our lives. In the absence of that, whatever you're saying is noisemaker. And so in this journey I have embarked on, as I share with you for a little bit over a decade, I have identified 7 different types of noise. I give them names, but just for today, I will share the names with you. The name of these noisemakers, I have identified 7 different types of noise. And I have called them this way, saying that the 7 deadly noise that will be bring the world of mankind to his moral, emotional, and psychological decay. The first noisemaker, groups, institution, organization, people, mind you, but I call them in group. The first noisemakers I identified is what I call the destructive noisemakers. This is a group of people who's making a noise that is very destructive, intentionally, purposely, and with great methodology. They are making a noise that is very destructive. That's one of the noisemakers I have identified. The other noisemaker I identified is what I call the discontent noisemaker. This group of noisemakers are discontent, and they're making a noise of discontent. Very, very interesting type of noise. And the third noisemakers I have identified is the rejective noisemakers. These are a group of people who take on a goal to speak, to behave, to express a sense of rejection, every moral principle we have adhered to for thousands of years that have held mankind in check and balance, the rejective noisemakers. I have also identified another group of noisemaker where I call the contentious noisemaker. These are a group of people, their intention is to contend with life, is to contend with moral value and logic and history, any narrative that it hold ethics, they are contentious noisemaker to contend with it. I also discover another group that is making a very, very peculiar types of noise. I call them the pretentious noisemaker. These are the people who pretend that they have message for the world. They are pretentious noisemakers, and that they pretend they have the best interests of mankind, the best interests of the world, the best interests of us at heart. Yet they're using the social media, the technological revolution that we all experience all over the world to make a pretentious noise. I also identify another group that I call it a very peculiar type of noise this group is making. This group is making a noise that I call the silent noisemaker. They're making a noise, and the noises come in a form of the silent noisemakers. And finally, I have also identified a group who's making a noise that I call the deconstructive noisemaker. This group's intention is to deconstruct any fabric, any foundations, any mechanical system that were in place. Now, mind you, I'm talking about group, people, organizations, institutions, individual, but I identify them as group who's making noise around the world, all over the world. These noisemakers are making those very peculiar, particular noise, types of noise, and I call this group the deconstructive noisemakers. Now, it is my intention to share with you in coming time, weeks and months, to describe with you, and I hope you willing to engage and indulge me in this conversation for me to describe the characteristic of each one of these noisemaker with you. And I hope you willing to engage and indulge me and take part of this mindful conversation for this critical time in our human history. And remember the thought I share with you that I have learned, some of which you probably say, hey, Mr. Pierre, I'm aware of that. Our lives are very noisy. The world is noisy and loud. We're living in a noisy and very loud world. And that our lives are broken. We're living in a broken world. And please remember, as I share with you, the concept of broken I'm speaking about is not broken our essence and our creative being. I'm talking we are broken mentally, emotionally, definitely socially and psychologically. And the criteria, if I say the variables that bring about our brokenness, our perilous pursuit, the things we have pursued, the needs, the want, and the desires, those obsession we have with things and dreams and goals, false dreams and false goal, as I have and will share with you. And so we are broken. Again, please remember, I'm not saying our essence of being and our creative being, we're not broken, but in our pursuit, causing mental, emotional, social, and psychological brokenness. And anyone who's talking and not addressing those I call, these are the fundamental, that person, these people, whoever they are noisemakers. That's all they're just making noise, because these are the fundamental. In addition to noise In addition to being broken, we're living in a very traumatized world. Our actions indeed constantly traumatize each other. We take actions, we make decisions, we go places, we pursue things, we react in ways that traumatize each other. Our trauma is in our face. Now, please understand me. I have worked over the years as a chemical addiction counselor, as a mental health person. I have worked with people over the years to watch their lives shattered by trauma. Trauma is real. Trauma is devastating. And so I come face to face with trauma every day in the lives of the people that I work with. And it's also a great pleasure every day of my life to aid, help, and take a very small part and lighten the load of someone who's dealing with any type of traumatic event in their lives. But on a global and a humanity, on a collective point of view, we are living in a very traumatized world. This very day, there are people who are facing trauma all around you and I. I am sitting here in this beautiful studio and able to have a conversation with you. I don't have to worry whether or not when I'm done speaking in the next few minutes, whether I'm going to make it home or not. That's not a thought I have. Unfortunately, we know, I know, you should know, there are those who are living around us, around the world, across the ocean. Every day for them is whether or not they're going to make it through. Living with trauma on a moment to moment, and we need to be aware of that. So these are the fundamental issue. And if anyone is speaking to us, if anyone believes they have a message to say and they're not addressing these fundamental, that person is a noisemakers. And so therefore, as I identify these noisemakers and as I share with you, I will make it a point that this podcast is a conversation that dedicated, that is committed to explore how rampant discontent, distrust, contentious, pretentious noisemakers are drowning the world of mankind into its emotional, mental, and psychological chaos. I am looking forward to share those thoughts with you, and I am asking you to join me, to engage me, and to indulge me in this conversation, mindful conversation for critical time. I will take some time next time to define what I mean by critical. There was never a point of time in the human history that it was not critical. And so I'm not referred to criticality in a form of what's happening. The human history never have a moment of silence in it. But the critical aspect I'm referring to is where we are in time with regard to the human history. And so I thank you very much. I am looking forward to share those thoughts with you, what I have discovered in my journey of exploratory as well as discovery. As I share with you, my intention was to write what I would find. I like to write. I encourage people to write. So my intention was whatever I find as I published that book in 2012, what is the book was telling the world and what is it, what was my intention and what is the world was telling me how I was experiencing the world. And then again, here we are, another methodology that we have that come through the social media is how we have this thing called the podcast through which we can communicate and share what's going on in our own world with the rest of the world. I thank you very much. And my name is Eddie Pierre, and I am looking forward to share those thoughts with you. Thank you so much. I want to thank everyone for listening. And if you haven't subscribed, do so to stay tuned with our future conversation. Again, this podcast is a production of Contentious Innovation. Once again, thank you for listening.